Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we've gathered some really harrowing true stories. These came from the community.
Yeah, and they touch on something pretty dark, how, institutions, the justice system, even just official silence, how they can intersect to hide some truly awful things.
Right, things happening just beneath the surface of places that seem quiet, normal even.
These aren't just like ghost stories or quick headlines. We're looking at deliberate secrecy.
Yeah.
And the psychological toll when the system's meant to protect you, they choose reputation instead. Or maybe efficiency over the actual truth.
So our mission today is really to relay these accounts, explore how silence, in all its forms, lets terror grow.
Exactly. Focusing on how that silence works.
Okay, let's start with a really chilling one. Institutional silence. This takes us back to Rhode Island, 1989.
Okay.
The narrator's father gets this high-paying job, vice principal, prestigious private school, and the big perk, a beautiful house, brand new, built to look old, fit in, and it was free, provided by the school.
Wow. A free house, brand new, right after some kind of tragedy. You got to look for the catch, right?
Absolutely. There are always strings attached.
And in this case, the price was basically participating in the town's silence. The cover-up.
That's it. Exactly. The family felt it right away. This unspoken pressure, the locals, kids and adults both, they'd get weird, wary, sometimes outright hostile the second they learned the family's address or, the dad's job title.
So they knew they were living somewhere significant, somewhere tied to something.
Right. Living in a house literally built on top of a carefully managed secret.
And what's interesting is how the town handled it. This place, pristine reputation, old money. They created this very precise, manageable half-truth.
A narrative they could control.
Exactly. And they used money, that high VP salary, as kind of an unspoken agreement, right? A don't ask, don't tell policy to keep everyone in line.
So the story the narrator first heard, 6 months before they moved in, the previous VP and his 3 kids died in a house fire.
Okay, tragic, but plausible.
Plausible. And the house was rebuilt, supposedly because it was haunted. Easier than the truth.
Which was?
The full horror wasn't a ghost. It was a calculated act of vengeance. And it stemmed from a total systemic failure.
Okay, let's unpack that. We're talking about Freddie Washback.
Freddie Washback, a student at the school, apparently subjected to, prolonged abuse by the former vice principal.
Under the guise of discipline.
Right. And the school, they heard rumors, they knew things weren't right, but they looked the other way, valued the VP's standing more than the student's safety.
A classic institutional failure pattern.
So one night, Freddie shows up at the VP's house, armed, shotgun.
Wow.
He forces the whole family, VP, wife, the 3 kids, into the TV room. But he didn't just start shooting. He wanted them to understand why.
What did he do?
He played a tape, a cassette tape he'd secretly recorded, documenting the abuse he'd suffered.
He made them listen.
Let that reality sink in. And then he opened fire. And the reports indicate it was deliberate, intentional. He wounded the VP and his wife first. Badly.
So they'd be conscious.
Exactly. Forced them to watch while he murdered their 3 children. Then he shot the parents again and set the house on fire.
Just unimaginable horror.
But there's another layer. The VP's wife, she survived.
She survived that.
Severely wounded, but yes. And in this truly harrowing detail, she managed to drag the bodies of her dead children out onto the lawn.
But not the husband.
Made no attempt to save him. Gave the police a full, frank account of his abuse, Freddie's attack. And then she vanished. Just disappeared. Refused to be part of the town's silence.
Wow. She chose truth over everything else.
And the aftermath, that's where the institutional failure really locks in. The school board facing this huge scandal.
Did they change policies? Put in safeguards?
No. They just doubled down on the cover-up. They drastically raised the new VP's salary, the narrator's father's salary.
To buy his silence.
Yeah.
Ensure he'd live on the site of the tragedy without asking questions.
Exactly. It's pure institutional self-preservation, prioritizing reputation over acknowledging this horrific truth.
And that pressure, it eventually broke the narrator's father.
Yeah. He quit. He realized, no amount of money was worth living in a place where truth and safety were just disposable.
A really stark example of how deep that kind of silence can run.
It is. And that brings us to another kind of silence, not institutional, but more bureaucratic, the silence that follows a discovery.
Okay.
So we move from that deliberate cover-up to, the sudden shock of investigative silence. This is in a seemingly quiet suburb.
Right. This story is about that awful feeling of no resolution. When your home, your safe space, suddenly reveals a hidden, disturbing past.
Yeah. This family, they needed a cheap start. Money was tight. The grandmother was heavily pregnant, so the grandfather buys this fixer-upper, rundown.
Okay, trying to build a foundation.
Right?
Yeah.
And the land itself, the soil, it was just terrible. So the grandfather decides he's going to dig up the whole backyard, replace the soil.
Hard work, but makes sense.
And that's when he starts finding bones.
Oh, no.
At first, they tried to rationalize it. Maybe old pet graves. They found some animal skulls.
Okay, maybe. You hope it's that.
But he kept digging. And eventually, he pulls out this one bone, and it's undeniably human. Just way too big for any animal they could think of.
That's the moment everything changes.
Completely. Human remains confirmed. The entire property gets sealed off, becomes a full-on crime scene for almost a year.
A year, wow. And the grandmother.
She understandably refused to raise their child in a house literally built on top of an unsolved mass grave. Who could blame her?
No one. Absolutely no one.
But the really frustrating part, the final blow, came from the state. The investigation eventually wraps up.
They tell the family what they found, whose bones they were?
Nothing. Zero contact. The police, the state lab, they took the remains, human and animal. But the family never heard another word. No ID on the bones, no explanation for the burial site, just silence.
That's investigative silence. The system does its job, technically, collects the evidence, files reports, but fails the human element. No closure.
Exactly. They're left with the financial ruin of a house they can't live in and this psychological weight of an atrocity they literally dug up themselves.
Just left hanging. The case is just a hole in the ground and a hole in the official records. Awful.
Yeah. And if that wasn't enough to shake your faith in things, we have the story of the Phantom Pooper.
Okay, the name sounds almost absurd, but the reality was anything but funny for the family involved.
Not funny at all. It highlights what happens with judicial silence, when the system fails to act decisively.
Right, this was sustained psychological terror.
This family, they bought their house cheap. A deep discount. They didn't know why at first.
Turns out the previous owners had fled because of this bizarre harassment campaign.
Yeah. For a week, every single night, huge piles of human feces would just appear in their yard.
Every night. That's relentless.
Relentless. The father was understandably furious. Targeted. So he decides to catch the person. Stays up. With a camera.
Smart move. Get evidence.
And he catches him. A naked man. Climbing over their fence, doing the act, and then running off.
Naked. Okay, that adds a whole other level of disturbing.
All right. So he talks to the police. They basically say, get proof. So the father prepares, this time, camera and a firearm.
Okay, escalating things, but given the circumstances.
He waits, sees the guy, mid-act, rushes out to get the photos, confront him.
And the man's reaction.
Terrifying. He didn't just run, he lunged at the father. Erratic, predatory, actually wrestled the gun away from him.
He got the gun.
He's got the gun. The struggle woke the neighbors. The guy points the weapon right at the father, pulls the trigger.
Oh my God.
Nothing happened.
Good.
In the panic, the father had forgotten to cock the weapon. Pure luck.
Unbelievable. Saved by a mistake.
Neighbors intervene. The guy escapes, but the father has the photos. Leads to an immediate arrest.
Okay, so finally justice.
You'd think. But this is where judicial silence comes in. The man was quickly released.
Released. After attacking someone with a gun, he wrestled away. Why?
Bungled evidence, apparently. Insufficient warrants, maybe. Chain of custody errors. Whatever the procedural failure.
The result was devastating. A known violent perpetrator, caught red-handed, basically walks free.
Exactly. And the family. They were terrified, convinced he'd come back to finish the job, to kill them.
I would be too.
They packed up immediately. Fled town, didn't tell anyone, just gone. Abandoned the discounted house, their life there, everything.
That just shows how quickly things collapse when the justice system fumbles. A disgusting nuisance becomes a potential killer on the loose because of paperwork.
It's chilling. Which leads us, appropriately, to one of the most notorious and genuinely cold cases in Illinois history.
Okay.
The horrific, almost ritualistic murders of the Dardeen family in Alena, Illinois.
Dana. Tiny town, right? Like 1,500 people.
Tiny. But it has this undercurrent of darkness. You have to go back. 60 years before the Jardine's, 1924. The town was shaken by arsenic murders.
Arsenic. Committed by who?
A respected local reverend and his mistress. A massive betrayal of trust in a small community.
Wow. So that history kind of hangs over the place.
It feels relevant. So fast forward to 1986. Keith and Elaine Dardine moved to Ina. Keith gets a job at the water plant.
Okay, starting a life there.
But Keith starts getting paranoid. Jefferson County, where Ina is, had seen like 15 homicides in just 2 years, including the really brutal Odell family murders.
15 homicides in 2 years in a rural area. That's a lot.
A lot. So Keith gets spooked, especially after Elaine gets pregnant. He starts insisting they need to move, feels like the violence is closing in.
Did anything specific happen?
He bought a gun after a strange knock on their door late one night. He was definitely on edge.
So, connecting that old history of betrayal, the arsenic murders, with this current spike in violence, his paranoia feels, well, justified. He sensed something was wrong.
Tragically, yeah. They didn't move in time. November 18th, 1987. Keith doesn't show up for work.
That's the call nobody wants to get.
His father goes to check on them, meets the police at their trailer, and inside, it's just an unspeakable scene.
What do they find?
Elaine, their 2-year-old son, Peter, and the body of a newborn baby girl.
A newborn.
Elaine had gone into labor during the attack, delivered the baby amidst the horror, all 3 of them bound, gagged, tortured, beaten to death with a child-sized baseball bat.
Oh, God. That's beyond horrific. A child's bat.
Yeah, and Keith, he was missing at first.
Okay, so maybe he was involved or abducted.
The next day, hunters found his body in a wheat field near a local college. He'd been shot, stabbed, and horrifically castrated.
Castrated. That points to something very personal, very targeted.
Absolutely. And his car, found later outside a police station 11 miles away in Benton, splattered with his blood.
Okay, so the killer drove Keith's car there after murdering him.
Bizarre. The whole town, Ina, just descended into chaos. Curfews were imposed. People started openly carrying guns. Understandable panic.
And investigators, what were they thinking? Motive?
That was the baffling part. It defied typical motives. No forced entry. They didn't take cash, a VCR, jewelry that was right there.
Okay.
So not robbery.
Okay.
Yeah. No sign of sexual assault. No evidence Keith or Elaine had debts or affairs, anything like that. It just didn't fit any standard profile.
Which makes it even scarier. Random or deeply personal in a way they couldn't understand.
And what pushes it into this really weird psychological space is the cleanup, or lack thereof, combined with one specific action.
What was this?
The killer took time to clean some things, but then deliberately tucked the bodies of Elaine and the children into bed.
Tucked them in after brutally murdering them.
Yeah. The Franklin County coroner called it a very personal, deliberate thing, almost ritualistic or paternalistic in some twisted way. It suggested a killer who wasn't just frenzied, but acting with some kind of specific, bizarre intent.
That detail is deeply unsettling. Changes the whole feel of the crime.
Definitely. So the investigation eventually zeroes in on someone, Tommy Lynn Sells.
The railroad killer. Known for hopping freight trains. Was he in the area?
He was confirmed near St. Louis around that time, which is enough to be plausible.
Did he confess?
He did, twice, actually. But the stories were wildly inconsistent.
How so?
First time, he claimed Keith propositioned him, and that's why the violence started. Second time, he claimed he was pretending to be interested in buying their trailer.
Neither sounds particularly convincing on its own. Why did they suspect him strongly then?
There was one piece of information Sells knew, something only a handful of investigators were aware of.
What was it?
The exact location where Keith's car was abandoned in Benton, outside that police station.
Okay, that is specific. How would he know that unless he was there or someone told him?
Exactly. It made him a very strong suspect, either the killer or someone very close to the investigation or the crime itself.
But there were doubts.
Big doubts. Friends insisted Keith was intensely private. He would never just invite a stranger like Sells into his home, especially not if he was feeling paranoid.
Right, that contradicts his behavior leading up to it.
And Keith's mother, Joanne, she initially believed Sells was guilty. But later, before his execution for other crimes, she expressed real doubt.
Why the change of heart?
She felt the details Sells gave just didn't match her son's character, didn't fit the facts as she understood them. She started to think maybe he had help, an accomplice. Or maybe he was just a false confessor, using details leaked from the investigation.
So even the victim's mother wasn't convinced in the end?
No. And that leaves us right back where we started, essentially. Investigative silence settles over the case again.
The core mystery, the real motive, the reason for the bizarre staging, who exactly tucked those poor souls into bed, it's still officially unsolved.
Yeah. So we've looked at institutional betrayal in Rhode Island, We've seen judicial and investigative failures, that silence in those suburban cases. And now, the Dardeen family. This agonizing, unresolved psychological horror.
These accounts, they really drive home that the most terrifying stories aren't always myths or legends. Sometimes they're the truths being actively suppressed right in our own communities.
Right next door, sometimes.
And if you look across all these stories, the money used to cover up abuse and murder, the justice system failing to hold someone caught in the act, the decades of silence around the Dardeens, it really makes you ask a tough question.
Which is?
How often does this kind of official silence, institutional, judicial, investigative, how often does it hide a truth that's far more damaging, far more corrosive to society than any ghost story people might choose to believe in instead?
That's a heavy thought to end on. We hope this deep dive into these truly haunting stories has kept you gripped, maybe looking over your shoulder a little.
Yeah, these are the kinds of accounts that stick with you.
If you want to follow more deeply disturbing true crime and horror stories like these, please do check out the Horror Docx channel. Make sure to click, like, share, and subscribe. We appreciate you listening to this deep dive.
Thank you for joining us.